such a screech. You'll shake and shudder in surprise when you hear these zombies shriek. Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul and seal your doom tonight. Spooky, scary skeletons.
Fáilte abhaile, my friends. I hope all of you are keeping well, and I would like to thank all of our subscribers as we have just hit our 100 subscriber milestone. This means so much to us, and our goal is to reach 1000. So if you are new and you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, please do so, as it helps our channel grow. Today we are going to look into the tales and rumours surrounding Loftus Hall, Ireland's most haunted house. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If we can get to 30 likes, that would be amazing, and it will help our channel be shown to others. So without further delay, sit back as we explore the legend of Loftus Hall. The first structure on this site was a fortified house called Redmond Hall, home of the Redmond family from the middle of the 14th century until they surrendered it to Cromwell in the middle of the 17th century. One of Cromwell's soldiers of fortune acquired the estate, but sold it to Sir Nicholas Loftus, then residing in Vedder Castle. Nicholas's son Henry had Henry Loftus of Loftus Hall, Esquire, 1680, inscribed over the entrance to Redmond Hall estate at Porter's Gate, and commenced a programme of construction and improvement on the estate. The earlier fortified residence was largely demolished, and a house of typical late 17th to early 18th century style built over its foundations. Henry's son, another Nicholas, became MP for County Wexford, and in 1751 was raised to the peerage of Ireland as Baron Loftus of Loftus Hall. A few years later he was sworn to the Privy Council, nominated Governor of County Wexford, and finally elevated to Viscount Loftus of Ely in 1756. Viscount Loftus's daughter Anne married Charles Tottenham, and they had a daughter, also called Anne. The Viscount's daughter died in 1768, and in 1770 Tottenham married his cousin Jane Cliff. It was in the 1770s, when Charles Tottenham, his daughter Anne, and his second wife Jane lived at Loftus Hall, that the house first gained its sinister reputation. One night, when a raging storm was battering Hook Head, a ship took refuge in the nearby bay. Its only passenger, a young man, seeing the lights blazing from Loftus Hall, walked up to its entrance. Knocking on the front door at a late hour, he was greeted with apprehension by Tottenham's servants, but he appeared to be a courteous, well-dressed gentleman, and so was invited in. Charles Tottenham soon deduced the young man to be an interesting character, who would no doubt provide some lively debate and social dialogue to his otherwise quiet evening spent with his wife and daughter, and invited the young man to stay a few days at Loftus Hall until the storm passed. Over the ensuing days, the visitor became well acquainted with Tottenham, his wife, and in particular his daughter Anne. The weather worsened, and so the party spent most of their time indoors, talking, reading, and in the evenings eating elaborate meals and playing cards. The young man quickly charmed the entire household. Anne, indeed, appeared to be absolutely infatuated. One evening, during a game of whist, Anne dropped a ring from her finger, and, bending down beneath the table, noticed that one of the young man's boots was off, and he unmistakably had a hoof instead of a foot. With a scream, she bumped her head off the table, knocking it over, and as she pointed to the visitor's hoof, Tottenham's wife also shrieked. The young man stood up, brazenly smiled, and told his hosts, "I am discovered." Then with a twirl, he shot up through the ceiling in a cloud of sulphurous smoke. Both Anne and Tottenham's wife fainted. Tottenham poured himself a half glass of brandy, which he downed neat in a couple of gulps, then shouted for his servants, telling them that they had been playing host to the devil. Tottenham's wife soon recovered, but Anne was absolutely distraught. Quite unable to walk, she was carried to her room known as the tapestry chamber, due to its fine crafted tapestry wall hangings. Her state of mind deteriorated. As the weeks passed, it became evident that she had been intimate with the devilish visitor and was expecting a child. The details of whether the child was born, if it survived, and what happened to it are not recorded. Anne becoming pregnant whilst unmarried was a disgrace to the Tottenham and Loftus families. The affair was hushed up and she was locked away in the tapestry chamber. There she spent month after month agonising over the ordeal and died, quite insane, a few years later. She would never sleep and spent the whole time on a chair, gazing out of the window in a trance. It is said her leg bones became fused from constant sitting, and in the 1940s, when the Loftus mausoleum at Feather-on-Sea was broken into, a strange shaped coffin was discovered. It appeared to have been specially constructed to hold the unnatural shape of her legs. After Anne's death, Loftus Hall became haunted by an awful apparition, often seen wandering down the corridors into the tapestry chamber, where it punched and slapped on the walls, striking terror into the entire household. The servants also insisted that the devil was still visiting the house, coming and going as he pleased through the hole he left in the ceiling, which, despite many attempts, had proved quite impossible to mend. Things got so bad that Charles Tottenham eventually requested the assistance of a Catholic priest, Father Thomas Broders, a last resort, as the Loftus Hall proprietors had long been staunchly Protestant, and at this time Catholicism was still technically illegal. Over several days, Father Broders performed every known exorcism of the church, eventually confining the evil spirit to the tapestry chamber. Tottenham then locked the door, and there the malignant spirit stayed closed up. A local myth relates that Father Broders' grave in Horetown graveyard bears an epitaph recording that he banished the devil from Loftus Hall. In reality, his gravestone, a raised granite slab near the centre of the graveyard, is inscribed with the barely legible record of his death. The artist Gabriel Beranger recorded a visit to Loftus Hall in 1780. Fixed here our quarters, went with the gentleman to see the deer park, which we could hardly reach, the wind was almost overpowering us. Iron coast, nothing but black rocks and sea. Returned home, dined, passed the evening agreeably. Tempest all night. He did not make a reference to ghosts, but he did record an ancient two-headed sword on display in the hall. Apparently the sword was used by Anglo-Norman invader Strongbow to punish his 17-year-old son for cowardice by cutting him in two. The whereabouts of the sword is now unknown. One evening, in the closing years of the 18th century, when the house was packed with a large party of guests, one visitor decided to stay in the tapestry chamber, despite being warned of its reputation. That night he had scarcely pulled the bedsheets up around him when something suddenly jumped up on the bed, growling like a dog. The curtains were torn back and sheets were ripped off and thrown on the floor. The terrified guest fired his pistol up the chimney in an attempt to scare off whatever it was that had attacked him. He then searched the room but did not find anyone. The door was still locked, just as he had left it. A few years later, an unfortunate servant named Shannon was put up for the night in the tapestry chamber, quite unaware of its history. In the early hours, the entire household was woken by his dreadful screams, and he was found lying on the floor in a state of mortal terror. He later told that he had been attacked by the spectre of a tall lady, presumably the ghost of Anne Tottenham. Another guest who stayed in the room found that the following morning all his clothes and belongings had been thrown around the room, including all the items from his locked travelling chest. Numerous other guests reported seeing Anne's ghost in or close to the tapestry chamber, and eventually it was decided that something had to be done. All the furniture was removed from the room and several walls were knocked down. It was at this time that the gruesome discovery was made of a skeleton sealed up in one of the chamber walls. No further detail of the skeleton was recorded, though one might conjecture that it were the grim remains of Anne's child. The enlarged room then became home to a billiard table. The ghost now seemed to gain a new vigour and spent most nights bashing the billiard balls around, which could be heard throughout the house. The story of the haunting of Loftus Hall was told to Queen Victoria shortly before Prince Albert's death by the wife of John Henry Loftus. The Queen remarked that she did not believe in such things, but desired that it should not be mentioned to Prince Albert because he did. In 1871, Loftus Hall was extensively remodelled as a fine new mansion house. Externally, the dimensions of the earlier facade remained largely unchanged, though the ground floor windows were lengthened and a pillared glass porch replaced the earlier doorway. The attic of the earlier house was replaced with a third story, and the structure was given a flat roof. Internally, the house was extensively modified with fine classical decoration, including a staircase reputedly imported from Italy with a construction cost of over £5,000, €500,000 in today's money. Nothing was done to improve the bleak surroundings of the house, and the reasons for this costly construction project, at a time when the position of landed estates in Ireland were appearing increasingly grim, remain lost to history. As the financial viability of landed estates in Ireland worsened, the majority of the Loftus estate was sold off in the Lands Act, and a buyer was sought for the hall. Eventually, in 1913, Loftus Hall and its remaining 70 acres of land were sold to a group of Benedictine nuns, who went on to use the house as a convent. In 1936, it was transferred to the Rosminian order, who used the house as a girls' school, converted one of the downstairs rooms to a chapel for local people to attend mass, and also opened the house as a holiday venue for other orders during the summer. In 1983, after the departure of the Rosminians, Loftus Hall was put up for sale and was purchased by Michael DeVoe, who reopened it as Loftus Hall Hotel. The hotel closed about 10 years later and soon began to fall into disrepair. Locked up and abandoned, Loftus Hall's sinister reputation now seemed to gain new grounds. The vast, deserted house, standing in a lonely position on the Hook Head Peninsula, was an intriguing sight to passers-by, but anybody attempting to view the house was chased off by locals who watched over the house like hawks. Loftus Hall acquired a new owner in 2012 and it's now open to the public. We would highly recommend that anyone visiting Ireland or is down by the Hook Peninsula in Wexford check it out, as it is a great experience and a great guided tour through this old haunted house. Once again guys, thank you so much for watching, and we really hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoy hearing about the haunted tales of Ireland, we would like to recommend a great book, Haunted Ireland by Tarquin Blake. We will leave a link to the book below in the description and hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe, and like always guys, good night and good luck.